on to.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. The time is 11:01 a.m. Special meeting agenda with our elections department. Calling the meeting to order, attending Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. One and only business item, review of precinct district boundaries with GIS Manager Dave Christensen and Election Manager Asa Gray per Idaho Code 34-301, and this is an action item, potential vote. Dave, Asa, who'd like to go first?
You can go for it. That'll be me. Dave Christensen here. We're bringing to you today basically a proposal for re-precincting balancing. So basically, every 10 years after the legislative districts are redrawn, we look at our voter precincts. First and foremost, because per Idaho State Code, our precincts cannot cross legislative district boundaries. But we also use this opportunity to try to balance the number of registered voters in each precinct to an acceptable level so we can fairly conduct our elections. Our goal was to create voter precincts to effectively conduct elections. Like I said, to achieve this, we decided that a range of between 1,300 to 1,700 registered voters per precinct was going to be used, with a perfect target number of 1,500. This target number will come into play as we get into the maps here in a little while, because everything is going to be based on whether we're above or below that target number, and we'll go into that. Just to understand that there were a few considerations that we knew that we would go into this project with that would change that number for some of our precincts. We knew that there would be certain areas that would have growth that was going to happen. Driving distance to some of the polling locations, especially on the southeastern portion of our county, is something that we consider to not burden our voters to drive too far, along with the ability for polling places. In some cases, you'll see that we have some precincts above 1,500, but we were looking at the polling places to make sure that they could handle that. So these are some of the considerations that we took into account that made us off of our number. The guidelines that we used as we drew these precinct boundaries was the Idaho State Code Section 34-306, which basically says, in a nutshell, we can't cross legislative boundaries, and these need to be visible features on the ground. We also can use city limits, school district boundaries as non-visual on the ground things. We also are allowed to use things like lakes and streams and power poles, things like that. So our goal was to put roughly 1,500 registered voters in each precinct. We were also going to take into consideration future growth when possible to minimize a need for an adjustment to the precincts, and I'll show you where we've done that. Also, when reasonable, we wanted to go ahead and use the school district boundaries and the city limit boundaries to help minimize the number of ballots, which saves in the cost of putting on elections. And then, like I said earlier, we also considered drive times. We did also consider general things like keeping communities together, city limits, those kinds of things, but I didn't put that down here. Want to go ahead and explain the data sets that I used. The first ones were ones that I just obtained that we currently already have. So the registered voters is from our election system. The Kootenai County Structures is the addressing database that we use for 911. The KC Roads is our road coverage. From our tax code area boundary, or our tax code area maps, I extracted our city limit boundaries, our school district boundaries. I used the current voter precincts along with the newly approved legislative district, and then the pictometry aerial imagery to help identify the features on the ground. So those are the base sets of data that I used to do this analysis. I did create two new sets of data to do this. One of them is simply basically the addresses that I've assigned from the last 5 years. So I extracted any addresses that had been assigned out of our KC Struct. That would help me identify areas that we've addressed, but yet we don't have registered voters in, so we could plan for future. And then I had to create a data set of the map of the registered voters. I basically, through matching their address, just put a point on a map, said here is where a registered voter is. That way I can do a tally, and that's where all these numbers come. So in totality, that's all the data that I used to do this analysis. There wasn't anything else. With that, I'd like to go ahead and bring up the map. And this is actually the legislative districts, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with a black and white outline. and the future proposed voter precincts. What I'd like to do is go ahead and show you a couple things here before we get into it. This layer here that'll come up as blue dots are all of our registered voters. Oftentimes we don't realize that we have not a lot out here in the northeast part of our county. So the maps often look kind of odd when we're out in there. We do have that growth data that'll come up here as red. It doesn't look very helpful right now, but as we zoom in, it'll make a lot more sense. Just to let you know, there is no attribute data really behind this map set of voters. All I did was bring over a precinct number and basically a legislative district column that I could populate in. There's no party affiliation, no any other information was immediately not brought in to this analysis for any purposes. Just simply a point of where our registered voters were. So one of the things I went ahead and did immediately after mapping all of our voters was take our current precincts, I call them historic on this map, and I went ahead and I attributed how many registered voters were in each one. Basically, I put them into 5 categories. Green means that they're plus or minus 200 of our target number. And then the pink means that they're a little bit, they're within 0 to 200 registered voters above. And the red shows above 200. And then the blue and light blue are the same way on going the downscale. So what I use this as a map to give me kind of an idea of what I needed to do to start with. And we can see that there was a lot of red in areas that we would expect a lot of growth, not so much necessarily in the outlying areas, which after 10 years and only a few slight adjustments, because it gets a little bit confusing to look at the whole county as a whole, and we're really looking only at legislative district by district, I'd like us to today look at these one district by one district, so we're not getting confused with moving.
So Dave, when you show the plus and minus, is that deviation from the 1,500 target?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay.
And so I actually have a data set here that has all of that.
Okay.
These numbers here are based on the newer precincts. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the county-wide, and we'll start with precinct number 2, legislative district number 2. And so we'll see here, these numbers are where I'm currently sitting with registered voters plus or minus 1,500. I can go ahead and show you that initially I started off with a large number here. It kind of took care of itself with this chunk of the legislative district. When it slid down here, that portion of this historic precinct needed to go into a different precinct. And so you'll see as I cycle this off that, oops, wrong one, sorry. We'll see that this one only has 38 now. It turned green. I didn't really change any boundaries here in the south whatsoever. I made one slight adjustment here where I-90 comes through. It used to tuck down ever so slightly into Wolf Lodge Bay. I made a straight line at I-90 to make it more simplistic. But realistically, you'll see that this southeastern portion of our county, we have our 2 districts that are fairly low, or 3. This is due to drive time. These were the original configurations. We felt like there was nothing better that we could do at this point in time, with the exception of making that one slight little adjustment. So that's why these numbers are so low. Most of the population in this district here really resides in this location, and we didn't want to try to connect them up with people in the northern part of our county. So that's all we really did with District 2. If there's any questions, please at any time go ahead and ask. Let's see if there was anything else that, yeah, everything else was very minor balancing with Precinct 2, or Legislative District 2 and the precincts. Legislative District number 3 had a little bit different set of issues. When we looked at the plus or minus for our old, or what we would call our current configuration, we saw that pretty much everything was over. We did increase the number, drop in a new precinct, by the way. I should have stated this proposal brings to you a configuration with 73 precincts. We had 70 before. So in order to make everything work out, we felt like we needed to add 3 additional ones. So as we worked through this to balance this out, we went ahead and took care of the issue over here on the north side of the freeway. We felt that having a few extra people here in the Hauser area was okay in their polling place. We were happy to have a little bit of room to grow. There is a subdivision right in here that is currently addressed. No structures that are there, but we expect that to fill in within the next year or so, which is one of the reasons that we left this number down. One of the interesting configurations in this area actually occurs here just south of Rathdrum is where we're looking. It's a little hard to see. I know I try not to turn the roads on too much because it adds a lot of busyness. But we can see this huge subdevelopment area. You can also see where these roads are kind of stopping. That's actually parts of subdevelopments that are going to continue, and we know this is going to happen. I worked to try to make it so that this wasn't all in the green and these were more in the light blue to a blue stage, but there wasn't an effective way to cut this area up at this time that would make sense. And we don't know where all the future roads are going to go. So we felt that it was better to go ahead and build this with the idea that we're going to drop a precinct right in this location, which will then in turn in the long run take the pressure off of these other ones when we need to a couple years down the road. So this is kind of an area that we know will need a new precinct, but at this time we felt it was better to hold off and fix it once and for all later on in the Rathdrum area. So there wasn't too much. Was there anything else in there in that district?
No, I think that was the main thing. Oh, if you want to talk about what we did
This-
up with Garwood and with, yeah.
Okay, this area also is down 700 from the ideal Hayden Canyon. So we're planning on not having to redraw that district, which is why that one is low. So that's the things of note in legislative district number 3 in the re-precincting. Number 4, which is mainly down here inside the city of Coeur d'Alene. Once again, I'll turn on the historic ones real quick. We'll see that we had basically a lot of red up in the areas that we have grown over the last couple years. This area seemed to be a little bit low, and we know there wasn't going to be a lot of growth down in here, which we were fine, but we had to take into account this new area that got moved into the legislative district that we had to move from the previous precinct. So what we did was I kind of worked from the southeast and worked our way through this district. And you'll see it's more or less a complete, oops. Turn off the steps. It's more or less a green district at this point in time. We have one notable location up here with a hundred people more than we would like. We felt that was okay. We did leave a little bit of growth right here. We know there's a few subdivisions that are going to fill in that little section of Coeur d'Alene right there. For the most part, we felt like we were able to balance this out to our ideal pretty well. Our last district, legislative district number 5. Once again, we have a few interesting scenarios. You can see basically this district down here, precinct, and this one, I didn't change at all, really. They happen to be low in population. Once again, we get into some driving time. I'll go ahead and throw up the historic one here just to show you. So you can see low population, low population. This one was basically ideal, and we had our heavy population there. And then, of course, we had some stuff going on inside the city limits of Post Falls. Excuse me, that was our current configuration, or our proposed. You can see red inside the city of Post Falls. We had a little bit high, but not much. What I tried to do was, you can see that I really didn't have enough population here south of the river and kind of west of Highway 95 there outside of the city of Coeur d'Alene. And I didn't want to drop in an extra precinct at this time. It just didn't seem like it would make sense. So what we did was we actually created a little bit heavier of a precinct where we felt there wasn't going to be a tremendous amount of growth, but the polling place could handle it. And then we balanced out that precinct here. As we move into the city of Post Falls area, you'll see a lot of blue, light blue and blue with a lot of negative numbers. This is area that we expect to grow. Just to show you what I was looking at, the red are addresses that I have assigned, and the blue are registered voters. So in areas like this, you can see there's whole subdevelopments where we have no registered voters, and I used estimations on where that would fill in, which is why you see in this district so much blue in all those areas. So in a nutshell, that was the process that I went through and simply, counted up the points of registered voters in each one of the precincts. I could throw on a polyline here of the districts. I'll turn off a couple of these things. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the process and/or the lines.
No, I think you did a great job. Very detailed, very objective. What's our total voter registration roll? Maybe Asa knows better.
103,464 on the data
okay.
that I was given.
It's up by about 70 since then.
Okay.
Chairman Felios, I would like to weigh in and just say, what a great job David
absolutely.
did. I mean, this guy knows his business, and they made him promise he wasn't gonna hire my elections manager, who is kind of a map fanatic. I had to find the right word there. But they have done a great job. And the one thing I would like to say, we did not look, and Dave said it, but I'm gonna emphasize it, at political affiliation at all. To do that is wrong. And if a precinctman is been drawn out of his or her precinct, I'm sorry, but you can run in the new one if you want to. I have fielded a lot of calls on this already, and this is not political in the slightest, what David has done.
And just for the record, no person has contacted me from anybody in regards to this map or any questions regarding it outside of our election staff. And I don't keep an affiliation in regards to public office and/or any, precinct committeemen or any elected officials.
And it's well known, we don't dare.
No.
Okay, and I think everybody knows when Dave is working on redistricting, you do not approach Dave, and nobody does.
Right.
So thank you for that. Thank you for the objectivity.
I appreciate
you too,
you
Asa.
guys too.
Absolutely.
We'll field the calls.
Yeah, you guys take them, right? And it's a totally apolitical process.
Yes.
Absolutely. I only simply counted points inside of polygons. That's all I looked at.
Yeah. Cool. Bill, any questions? Leslie?
No, not at all. I'm very happy with how this has worked. I've been following it on YouTube as you described, and I think David and Ace have done a great job. And Jim, I really respect the nonpartisan nature of the exercise.
Okay. So now, just for everyone's benefit, where did the court weigh in on this? What was the court's role? Go right ahead.
So what the court did, the court was reviewing the legislative districts as drawn by the Bipartisan Redistricting Commission at the
Right.
state level. They ruled in favor, unanimously, 5-0, in favor of the commission's maps. They said that the commission's choice to take into consideration the equal protection clause over the 7-county split maps that would have stretched that equal protection dramatically was the right choice. And so they upheld the maps, so we didn't have to wait for the commission to go back to the drawing board and try to draw new legislative boundaries or whatever. We were able to move forward with that. So the court upheld the maps is effectively what their role was in this. And then based on that, Dave was able to come in here and finalize these precincts within the legislative boundaries.
So who decided 73? Is that the court?
Nope, we decided that based on the population level. We were initially, when I talked with Dave, I was thinking we might even have to go as high as 75, but based on the current population, 73 became the happy middle number there. And also, another thing I did want to mention is the numbering of the precincts. So what we're doing,
You know what legislative
so
district is.
if you were used to numbers 1 through 70 before, which I think we all were, we have taken a model from, and I will say this and then I'm going to give a grain of salt caveat to it. We've taken a model from Ada County. Not always my favorite thing to do. In this case, their model for numbering precincts works really well. They start with the legislative district number and then count, and then do the precinct numbers within that ledge district from there. So for our example, we're gonna have legislative district 4 goes from 401 to 420. Legislative district 5 goes from 501 to 522. Legislative district 3 goes from 301 to 323. And legislative district 2 goes from 201 to 208. So we've renumbered we think that this will not only be more effective when we want to drop a precinct in not having precinct 74 be between precinct 11 and 12. We can have precinct 324 drop in there and now the numbers make more sense. Also, this will help voters know which legislative district they're in more easily. I get calls all the time, especially after something's changed with redistricting or we've had to change a precinct boundary. Well, I was in Ledge 2, but now you're telling me I'm in Ledge 3. Okay, your precinct number starts with your Ledge district number. That's where you are. So we think that this will be a more effective way of numbering the precincts going forward and will allow for the growth that we are seeing in our county.
Okay, so for example now, thinking forward to the election in May. Okay, so let's say somebody wants to run for office, and let's say it's in the 4 series precincts. Okay, so you have, let's say, I don't know if in fact this is the case, 4A, 4B. I know there's a 5A, 5B.
Yeah.
When that candidate comes forward to whatever, let's say to challenge, do they have to indicate 4A or 4B, or is it sufficient that they live in the 4s and can go ahead?
So because you're talking about legislative district candidates. if I'm
Yes,
hearing you correctly.
legislative.
Yes, so when they file, so they file with the state level first
Go
off
ahead.
because they're legislative. They have to indicate if they're running for seat A or seat B.
Okay.
Because the entire district votes for both seats. It's not like half and half. So
Okay.
they do have to indicate which seat,
seat
or
that
if they're
they're-
running for the Senate seat, which is just one, obviously. And so, yes, they will have to indicate that.
As long as they're in.
As long as they're in
the
legislative district 4,
5
yes.
Or 4, okay.
Or
got it.
5 for 5 seats, yep.
Understood. Dave?
Commissioner Villegas, you had asked about the number of precincts, and honestly, when I did the work, I cut the polygons, our current precincts, by the legislative districts, so I couldn't cross. And then I just started moving those, so the number 73, actually, the data picked the number. At one point, I thought I was gonna need 75, but I deleted 2, and so I'm bringing you 73. So it was simply the data and how they distributed.
So when we vote today, basically, my understanding is that you're asking us to affirm the work that you've done at 73, is that
Yes, we're
correct?
asking you to affirm this precinct map, and then the official resolution will come before you at a business meeting.
Okay. Leslie? any-
That way we can start with getting maps and stuff changed over so candidates know where they live and can search by address where they live, rather than trying to decipher from their map that we have online right now as the
Understood.
draft.
And then we'll have to enter it into the state system, so we're working right now with the state. And he's doing obviously the GIS and the polling lookup tool, which we'll be utilizing, I think, for a while until we get everything clarified with the state and how we're gonna proceed forward, implementing into the state system.
Okay.
Oh, I think
Any
it's
que-
great.
Any questions?
No.
Bill, questions?
No more questions.
Motion?
I move that we approve the precinct district boundaries as outlined per Idaho Code 34-301.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios.
Aye, and the motion is carried. So the district boundaries as proposed by our GIS manager, Dave Christensen, is hereby approved per Idaho Code 34-301. Public comment? Summer?
Push, Summer.
thank you. Put,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
put it back
No,
where
put
it
the
was
green
and
light
just
on.
push the button. Push the button.
Get the,
Okay.
There
yeah,
you go.
you're good.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Why is 515 so funky shaped? I'm just asking because I think I live in 517. So it's personal interest, but it's so U-shaped.
It could have been, like, I did try to keep historically what was going on. It could simply just be.
I think it's because of those apartments that we're talking about.
You wanna, yeah.
Oh, is that over near the mill over there? Because I
So-
am in 517.
Well,
I can tell where I am.
I think some
That
of
was,
yeah.
that was the precinct before. So
Yeah.
10 years ago. Yeah, I don't know why we drew it that way 10 years ago.
Just, sorry, just very weirdly shaped when
No,
the
it's
rest
all
of
right.
them
You
are
know,
all blocks.
I'm
and-
thinking that it may have had to do with where city limit boundaries were at that time.
Yeah.
Is my guess.
Okay.
But my memory is a little bit fuzzy from back then.
Yeah. Well, thank you, because that was weird.
Okay.
And one of my goals during this process was to leave as many of the boundaries where they were. I wasn't trying to mix everything up. And so like in this case, the numbers probably ran out just fine, and so I didn't do it.
Well, and there is a fairly big newer apartment complex over that way, so.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other public comments? No? Look at this. 11:27, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again.